Good afternoon. It's 2:41 p.m. Central Time, 7/12/2022. And I am an amateur YouTuber, but in a sense I'm a pro because this is a commercial channel. I make almost nothing because people just buy ad blocker. But it's a job. In a sense, I have a duty, and I'm doing this out of a sense of duty. Let's talk about the condition of Master Steve Chambliss, possibly Grandmaster Steve Chambliss. He is a foundational martial artist in the Hamilton-Trenton region. And my friend Grandmaster Jose Gonzalez asked me to do this, and I feel obligated to do this, even if he hadn't asked me. So who is Grandmaster Steve Chambliss? I know in Tang Sudo, when you get to a certain rank, whether you're the head of an organization or not, you are a Grandmaster. And I know there are multiple branches of Tang Sudo and multiple organizations and branches of those organizations. So, forgive me if I say something wrong. Forgive me if I misunderstand who's a master, who's a Grandmaster. I'm doing my best as a journalist. But I do know this. I grew up in Hamilton, New Jersey. My family moved there sometime in the 70s. We came to America in 1975 and eventually to Hamilton, I'd say probably around 76, 77, possibly. We were definitely there by 76. And if you were a adult and you trained martial arts in Hamilton, New Jersey, and you knew who was who, you knew who Steve Chambliss was. He ran the Jade Dragon. Tang Sudo in Hamilton, New Jersey, Hamilton-Trenton, is actually an interesting phenomena because Chuck Norris's instructor, Jay Chul Shin, the late Jay Chul Shin, actually moved there and began to teach there. And he also taught in several locations. I know there was a Tang Sudo school in Burlington that he taught at, and there were branches. If you practice Tang Sudo in that region, in Hamilton, Trenton, Cherry Hill, if there's any branches, at some point your story intersects with Jay Chul Shin, and who pretty much brought Tang Sudo to this country and then, established such a strong presence in New Jersey. And I think later he moved to Philadelphia and established the headquarters there, World Tang Sudo Association. And Steve Chambliss was one of the early black belts there, one of the early sabumnim there, which is the equivalent of a sensei, and taught many people who later became masters, some of whom taught masters. It's been that long. Steve Chambliss, Jose wanted me to talk about his various fights. I mean, without an encyclopedic memory of them, I do know he did fight point style. Joe Hayes and Joe Louis, both great martial artists in their own right. He competed in various tournaments. He did some kickboxing, although he never made a career out of it. He did some boxing, certainly worked out in boxing gyms, and anybody who was anybody knew who he was. One of my instructors, Rick Hahn, who taught an American karate style, the Way of the Sphere, which, I've given you the backstory of that. I mean, Dennis Dwyer, there's a lot of talk that he at some point had trained in Tang Sudo in that region and was, either a green belt or a red belt in it. But I mean, I know that Dennis Dwyer was a martial artist, black belt martial artist in his own right, in what his father taught him. And I believe that, so certainly, here's another thing I'll tell you. My instructor, Rick Hahn, worked out with Steve Chambliss. And I know this because at one point I was talking about various martial artists, and I was saying, well, I got a friend of mine, he works out at the Jade Dragon with Steve Chambliss, and Rick Hahn was like, boy, that boy could fight. That boy could fight. I used to work out with him all the time. Turns out they were friends. They used to work out in each other's backyards all the time, spar and do whatnot. Which, again, I've never heard anybody say anything bad about Steve Chambliss. And I've talked to people in that region who just love to talk bad about other martial artists. Like one of my kung fu instructors, Ishmael Sadat, had very little nice to say about other martial artists. Was all to include other kung fu people. He had the opinion he was the best, and everyone else's kung fu certainly was substandard to him. But he knew Steve Chambliss. He never had a bad word to say about him, and as a matter of fact, he was often worried about how he looked in front of Steve Chambliss. So I'm going to tell you two incidences, one related to Steve Chambliss and one not related to Steve Chambliss. Because again, I only saw the man once. That was around 98 or 97. It was at a tournament. He was in his civilian clothes. He looked like a tall, well-built man. He was African American, fit, had... I think he was in his 50s at the time, or something like that, or 40s. Upright posture, broad shoulders, lean waist. He wore some jeans and what looked like dress shoes, and looked very well. His carriage was really great. He looked like a leader, and he looked like an athlete, right? And sorry about all the noise in the hallway. We'll try to focus, but everyone knew Steve Chambliss. Everyone in the Hamilton area was influenced by him. The Way of the Sphere was possibly in two different ways influenced by him. I know if you spar with someone regularly enough so that they hang out in your backyard and you hang out in theirs and you're sparring, that's going to influence your teaching. So Steve Chambliss was an influence on Rick Hahn's teaching of the American karate system, The Way of the Sphere. And Rick certainly had a lot of kicks. Spin kicks, spin hook kicks, light up hook kicks, spin back kicks, jump kicks. He certainly had a lot. And the other black belts in the style, some practiced more kicks than him and some less. But I also have to say this. People I went to school with, in high school, Lou Bellardo, at the time, I think he was a second-degree black belt in that Tang Sudo system, which there was Shin's Karate, which was Tang Sudo, and Jade Dragon, which was Tang Sudo, and they were the same people, the same lineage, just different branches of that Tang Sudo. And, I went to high school with Lou, and he was tournament competitor like I was, and he was doing kickboxing, and we used to hang out and talk all the time. There was another guy, Keith Oliver, said he got a red belt in that system and decided he liked boxing better. He kind of thought the whole point sparring and stuff was bogus, and Keith Oliver showed me a little boxing. And there was actually a lot of people that had a red belt in Tang Sudo in my age group and above in those years and in later years in Hamilton. Tang Sudo was extremely popular there, and their influence was so strong that even judo people, I met judo people, I met Shotokan people that had, learned a couple kicks from them, and they were doing what were atypical kicks for their system because they just picked it up from a friend, or maybe they joined that school for a while before switching. But Steve Chambliss was a huge influence in that area, and that area was a huge influence in Tang Sudo. And everybody knows Chuck Norris, right? And Jay Chul Shin taught Chuck Norris. Jay Chul Shin taught in my home area, my hometown. So here's what I'm saying. This is not a good time for Steve Chambliss, a man who was a huge influence in martial arts in my area, on the East Coast, in Tang Sudo, and by extension the world. he's probably in his last days, folks. He's been in a coma, I don't know, for at least a year or more. He's probably not going to pull out of it, and there probably some talk or some consideration of taking him off life support, because he's in a completely, from what I hear, a completely vegetative state, and I'm not his family, I'm not his loved ones. There's nothing I can say about what should or should not happen to him in that regard. But here's what I will say. A man that I never met, that I have no personal interaction with except a visual sighting once at a tournament, right, is soon to pass away and probably fade from people's memories, and I think that would be a tragedy. Okay, and the reason why is because Tang Soo Do was so huge in my hometown and in that region, in New Jersey, in Pennsylvania. The World Tang Soo Do Federation, headquartered in Philadelphia, still has so many members. J-Chul Shin has passed, and Steve Chambliss may be soon to pass, but they should not be forgotten. And here's what I'll say. If and when Steve Chambliss passes away, if you do any form of Tang Soo Do at all in the Hamilton region, in Trenton, in central Jersey, and in New Jersey, and in Pennsylvania, especially Philadelphia, and you do not in some way acknowledge him, attend his funeral, give him a write-up in your magazine, your organization, your webpage, shame on you. Because this man was part of the foundation. We're talking the 70s. We're talking when aside from Chuck Norris, no one knew who Tang Soo Do was. And if you were a Chuck Norris fan, you had to be kind of a martial art geek to know what style he did. They just knew him as the karate champ, right? So it's not as important for me to say who we fought, all the trophies he won, all the point matches he won, who we boxed with, who we kickboxed with. He is part of your history. There are so many branches. Berg Tang Soo Do, I think, was big in the 80s, and I think they were a branch or affiliated in some way with the World Tang Soo Do Association. Shin's Karate still exists in Hamilton, and they teach Tang Soo Do. I don't know whether the Jade Dragon is still there. I don't know if anybody still teaches the Way of the Sphere in Hamilton, New Jersey, but I'm telling you all that was influenced by Tang Soo Do, whether anybody wants to admit it or not. All right. And if you're a latecomer, if you live in the Hamilton, Trenton region, Central Jersey region, and you teach, Filipino martial arts, Jeet Kune Do, any of these sort of later comers, the exotics, right? Believe it or not, Tang Soo Do had an influence on you. Because I'll tell you this, many people who later on went on to earn black belts and black sashes in other styles and teach in that region got their start at Shin's. Shin's was a very popular place. I'm going to tell you my opinion of growing up around these people and interacting with them. You have to realize I had not trained outside of Hamilton. Okay? I saw what I saw, and I saw what was in the magazines and what was in television and movies. And, Shin's had a reputation as kind of a place where it was easy to get a black belt in terms of everyone's like, oh, yeah, you can get a black belt there in like 3 years, 2 years, right? It's so easy. And they have black belt contracts, which were a new thing. And what I didn't know was if you went to the Orient, if you went to Korea and trained Tang Soo Do, and went to Japan and trained a Japanese martial art, that was actually average. 3 years for many martial arts. Now, mind you, that's because we had a fairly high standard in Hamilton. Many places it took 5 years to get a black belt, and that's if you trained there, 4 days a week, 5 days a week. If you went to tournaments, if you went to special events, still, the Japan Karate Association, I think even if you were a very dedicated regular trainer, 5 years at least, American Karate Institute waved the sphere, often 6 years or more. It took a while to get a black belt in that region. And so what I didn't know was, although we thought the regional Tang Sudo people were kind of on an easy fast track, they were probably higher than the national average. And in terms of knowledge, I mean, you had Grandmaster Jay Chul-Shin, Chuck Norris's instructor, living there, teaching there, right? And even when he moved out to Philadelphia, I mean, you cross a bridge. You cross a bridge and then drive a few miles and you're there, okay? So he was actually hugely influential. And it seems to me, the news I'm getting is that there's just not a lot of people, that remember him, that have visited him in his, condition, or that may even know that when he passes, right? So although I personally don't have a lot of involvement in his lineage, I personally, growing up, didn't necessarily admire or adore Tang Sudo and the Tang Sudo people. I will tell you that as an adult, knowing what I know, hearing what I've heard, he's a big deal, and he's soon to pass. And what can I say? If you're part of that lineage, note his passing. Contact his family. Give him the send-off and the memorial and the memorialization that he deserves. I, an outsider, should not be the main person giving this information out to the public. I'm not a Tang Sudo person. I am a journalist, though, and I do feel obligated to report about what's going on in my old hometown, and I do feel obligated to give the news that my friend Jose Gonzalez requested that I do. So, again, Grandmaster Steve Chambliss, in a coma, has been in one for a while. Either he's going to pass away soon as a result of his condition, or who knows. I mean, there may be talk about taking him off life support. I don't know all the legalities of that and all that, and certainly not suggesting it or deriding it, right? Just trying to pass off the news that I know. So, Grandmaster Chambliss, you were part of the foundation that created what I, as a teenager, walked into and used to help me grow up into a man. And even though it wasn't direct, it was indirect. Much as if I walk through this town, if I cross a bridge, someone built that bridge for me to cross. If I ride my bike on the trails, someone built that trail, cleared it, and maintains it. But some of these trails are 100 years old. Some of these bridges are 200 years old, right? And we should at the very least acknowledge that and maintain those bridges and those trails and those memories and those histories. Thank you very much. Have a good day.